you're on the far side of it, and people who are not.
One of the things I learned when my wife was diagnosed with cancer is I learned what it meant to be a caregiver. The caregiver's not sick. The caregiver's not in pain. The caregiver's, not going through surgeries and all of that. But the caregiver carries a burden that nobody understands. I remember 4 weeks into Trina's cancer with everything we were dealing with, and I asked myself the question, will I ever not be tired? Because it's an exhausting role.
Sure.
Oftentimes, and I'm trying to get this through to our church people, because in a church our size, we have, people pass away, people are sick, is you're not going through a trial right now. Always be on the lookout for someone who is. Always try to be there. Always try to step up to the plate,
right,
and help them bear one another's burdens, so fulfill the law of Christ.
Sure.
It gives a perspective in life and a depth that you don't get when you're just kind of focused on, well, everything's good for me.
Sure, because there's always someone who's got burdens.
Exactly. And also, I preach this to our people, be careful about passing judgment on somebody's going through a hard time. You haven't walked a mile in their shoes yet. You're not God. You don't know the reasons. You might think you do, but Job's friends thought they did, and they were terribly wrong. So there's a whole sense of compassion for someone like you that haven't been through a lot of issues yet. You just take the good God's given to you and be a blessing to other folks, and you'll learn from them. Long before I had cancer, one of my best friends in the ministry did, and he eventually passed away from liver cancer. And I learned more just by being his friend than I could ever imagine, so that when cancer struck me, I pretty much knew how to deal with it because I watched my friend Dale go through it. Yeah. So there's just learning at all aspects of these things.
That's helpful. So, people who go through tough situations, spiritual folks, most of them will talk about how that drew them closer to God. Is that something, that someone should ask for? Like, should I say, God, can you put me through something to draw me closer to you? Because that's an incredibly scary prayer request, but we want to be closer to God. How would you, is there negotiating that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's like somebody saying, tribulation worketh patience, so I don't pray for patience because I don't want tribulation.
Right.
I don't think we have to ask for trials. They are a part of life. Man's days are few and full of trouble as the sparks fly upward.
Right.
They're going to come to all of us in some form or another. God knows what we're able to handle. There's a lot of important truth in that. So I don't think we have to ask for it. I think we just ask, Lord, I want to be close to you. And Lord, show me how to do that. And it doesn't necessarily take a trial.
Right.
To draw us closer, though the reality is most of us pray better during hard times.
Absolutely.
Our church is praying a whole lot more right now because of the way the coronavirus has affected our state, and the governor has basically shut everything down, including church services. And all of a sudden, we're realizing how important it is, and everybody's worried and concerned. So we're praying more, and it ought not be, but sometimes we need the trial, and God does do that. I think you just get up every day and say, Lord, help me walk with you. I want to please you today. I want to be yours. And God can do that with or without the trial. Absolutely.
Right. He promises to draw nigh to us, right, if we draw nigh to him.
Exactly.
So shifting gears just a little bit, and I only have a couple more little things. Just in general, regarding being a Christian man, we already talked sort of a little bit about your advice towards a younger man, maybe going through a trial or who's about to, but what does it take in your mind to be a man? I know this may be a loaded question, so if you need a minute, but what does it mean to be a man?
Well, loaded question. That's a good way to put that.
The simplest definition you can, think of.
Character and consistency, probably the two biggest things that men are lacking today. Oftentimes when I have young men come in on staff, they're excellent at video games, but the work ethic is somehow lacking, and
Right.
there's a lot of reprogramming that's got to happen there. But I think the character to do right and to do it consistently are some of the biggest areas, it's everywhere. It's
Right.
in your diet, it's in your exercise, it's in your walk with God, it's in your ministry. Just to do right and to do it consistently. Many of us are hit or miss, and a crisis drops us to our knees, and when the crisis is over, we're done praying. That's not character or consistency.
Right.
And to me, looking at where I'm right now, manhood has nothing to do with how far I can throw the ball. Or anything else that I may have thought was important as a younger man. It's, am I a man of character? Do I just do right on a consistent basis? And I think off the top of my head, those are the two words that describe manhood to me.
Those are good words. Off the top of your head is good. So with society being the way that it is that more difficult? The character and consistency is like raising a kid. I know your children are grown, but you have grandkids. Do you think it is any different, or are people saying that for centuries? It's harder than it was, and how do we, as maybe a father, negotiate the difference in society now and then?
I definitely think it's harder than it used to be. And in different parts of the country or even the world, it may be harder or less depending. For example, here, the cost of living in New England is outrageous. And
Right.
Many families, husbands and wives, are both working jobs. They are trying to put their kids through Christian school, or they're homeschooling their kids, and they've got multiple activities going on. In addition to that, when I raised my kids, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have 500 channels on the television. And we didn't have cell phones in everybody's hands. And all of those things, that technology, while it's nice, it opens doors for problems to come in. And if we're not careful, the television or the iPad is raising our child while we're just trying to make ends meet. So I definitely think it's harder. So that character and consistency, we have to organize our priorities much, much more diligently today than we used to do 20 or 30 years ago, because we didn't have all of these distractions in our lives like we have right now.
Sure. That's absolutely the truth. I know our pastor was teaching through, I think it was a series on social media, but based off of a book by Gary Chapman, Growing Up Social. And I know that's been very helpful as far as raising kids and a family. One last question. I know that a lot of men, myself included, struggle with the concept of leading our family, because we know, and even the things you talked about, character and consistency, walking with God, just being right and doing right. That's good, and it is very tough. But I think we often are looking for something more practical. Is that a unicorn? Looking for something more practical, looking too far? Is it just walking with God and reading the Bible and listening to our pastor, or are there some practical things as far as leading our family that we could?
I don't think it's a unicorn at all. From the time our kids were little, when our kids were little, we were in the process of starting a church in Western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. We included our kids in everything. When I went out soul winning, I would take one of the kids with me, and my son Tim was 6, and my daughters were 4 and 2. And so we included them with us. And during that time, they're watching me talk to people about the Lord, and I'm talking to them about the Lord and about what things you're doing. The Bible says, Deuteronomy, talk about the things of God when you walk by the way, when you rise up and sit down. And reading our Bible and praying and stuff, that's foundational in our relationship with the Lord. But it's that day-to-day living that's important. My wife was just a master at every little thing that came along, finding a way to tell our kids how awesome God was. If there was a thunderstorm, instead of the kids all shrieking in fear at the crash of thunder or the lightning, she would go out and stand on the porch with them and say, isn't it amazing how powerful our God is? Look what God's doing.
Sure.
So that our kids grew up loving thunderstorms.
Yeah, that's great.
But it was those practical things like that on the day-to-day basis that our desire was just to make God real to our kids. And then as they got older, we got older, and these trials came along, we had a new classroom to teach all of those things. And every time God answered a prayer, provided a need, worked out a problem, we let our kids, did you see what God just did? So that it was just ingrained in their hearts that God's real and that God's good.
Do you think the reason that we don't do that is laziness or ignorance or some other thing?
In some cases,
a family who
it's
doesn't
not
really
taught.
point to God like that.
Yeah,
Sure.
In some cases, it's not taught. My wife and I didn't grow up in Christian homes. We both were saved through bus ministries. So we didn't have any idea how to have a Christian marriage or to, be Christian parents. So we just ask a lot of questions from people older than us whose kids were grown, who had turned out loving God. And those were the things that they talked to us along the way. And the biggest thing they told us is just be real in front of your kids. Don't be one thing at church and another thing at home.
Yeah.
And that was the number one statement, both from the parents and their grown kids. My parents were real. And some of that's just not taught. It ought to be common sense. We would think so, but it's not.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. If, I know that a lot of your parenting style has to do with, who your parents were and what you saw them do.
It does. Our kids follow us, sometimes to extremes, but they do take notes of everything that they're watching us do. So Trina and I just had a burden to do it right, and we didn't always. Tons of failures along the way, which we readily admit to. But,
Sure.
It was trial and error, but I'm hoping that by and large our kids saw that even though we weren't perfect people, we were real and we really were sincere about our walk with God and really wanted to please Him at home, at church, wherever we happened to be.
Sure. And it sounds like, you're coming back to things we talked about before, some humility, in front of your kids and saying, yeah, we did this wrong, as well as humility to get help, and then a willingness to grow and be constantly learning.
Yes. Yeah, and we've told our kids, I'm sorry before, because we did something and then looking back on it, it wasn't the smartest thing or it wasn't a fair thing. And, we've had to apologize for our kids. And I think that went a long way with them to realize that, we were sincere and we loved them. And even if we made a mistake, it wasn't because we were being bad. We thought at the moment that was a good thing, but we learned better. So we were going to fix it.
Sure. Well, Brother Tom, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to me. I don't have any further questions for you unless you had some advice you wanted to drop on us before we left.
Just don't ever forget how good God is and that God's always in control. And if we can rest on those two things, we'll get safely through this life.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking your time out to talk to us.
Well, thanks for letting me be a part. I appreciate that.
I don't know about you, but that conversation was challenging and provoking and helpful. Let's take some of the things that we heard and put them into immediate action. Grab a piece of paper and a pen. First, whether or not you're in the middle of a trial or a storm, write down those ABCs of suffering. A for accept, B for befriend, and